And lo and behold, it's 30 minutes past. So here we go. Firstly, welcome everybody to this webinar, our first webinar from the International Association of Hearing Accessibility. Be good to give you just a little brief overview of the organisation that's hosting the event today. We've got some fantastic speakers, but just give you a few words about the association. We have rebranded formally from the International Hearing Loop Manufacturers Association. Obviously, there are lots and lots of questions about different technologies, so we felt it was time to rebrand and be much more of an inclusive body than just focusing on the hearing loop side of things. So in that journey from the loop manufacturers to the International Association of Hearing Accessibility, we want to be more inclusive, not just to manufacturers, but to service providers, installers, maintainers, architects, specifiers, hearing aid wearers themselves, hearing device manufacturers, and of course, the product manufacturers themselves. So that's a little bit of background about who's hosting you today. As I mentioned just now, we've got some great speakers. I'm hosting the event. My name's Andrew Thomas. I'm the chair of the association. What can I say about our speakers today? They're all very good speakers. You'll be very well educated in what their subjects are. We're going to start off with Sam Burkinshaw, who's the head of business development with Ampetronic and Listen. Those guys were first out with the Auracast technology, and I think they've got a lot of experience in this field. So really looking forward to Sam's presentation. Then that will be followed by Alastair Moore. Alastair's the technical lead at the RNID, that's the Royal National Institute for the Deaf. Alastair has been very forward thinking about what this technology can bring to the assistive listening world, and brought out a really good document back in February this year, which I'm sure many of you would have seen. And then the third speaker will be none other than Juliette Sterkens. Juliette is a renowned speaker, has had over 1 million views, I believe, with her TEDx talk about 18 months ago, an audiologist and a hearing aid advocate. So some really good stuff that you guys will be able to hear. Then we'll hopefully finish the session with a Q&A period. We will have the help for the Q&A with a gentleman called Peter Mapp. Peter's a consultant in this industry, very knowledgeable, and he's involved in the development of some of the standards that are going out there for Auracast and the assistive listening standards. So really good person to have around. Just some housekeeping before we start. The session will be recorded and made available at a later date. Notification of how to view it will be shared via the IHA newsletter and social channels. Attendees can activate captions by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the screen. And please, can I ask everyone to mute their microphones during the session when the guys are talking. We've mentioned the Q&A session, but questions can be submitted via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, or click the reactions button to raise your hand and ask the question, and we'll sort that out during the Q&A session itself. Hopefully we'll have time for all the questions, but if we don't, apologies in advance. So let's get up and running so we can get everything into the hour and a quarter session we have. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll just share screens now. If I could get a nod from you, Andrew, if you can see my screen. Just as you turn your camera off. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Sam Burkinshaw, Head of Business Development from Ampetronic Listen Technologies, and we have a suite of Auracast products. But today I'm not going to be talking so much about our products, more about the technology and how it's used and deployed in spaces, and some of the compatibility issues that we've encountered, and some of the successes we've had along the way. So first of all, an important thing to think about is what is Auracast? It's a new standard for broadcasting audio from one device to many people in a variety of different environments. And it's truly a broadcast to anybody that's within range of the signal that's being produced. It's been optimized so that it's low latency audio, and also, quite importantly, uses a low amount of battery consumption within the devices that it's broadcasting to. There's no bespoke app required at all, because it's a non-proprietary technology, which means that you don't have to go between different venues and download different apps to connect, for instance. It should be a relatively seamless end user experience. There's potential for quite long ranges, but that can depend upon the environment or the situation that you're going into. But there's devices that are capable of covering your living room up to a train station platform, depending upon the application at hand. It is part of the Bluetooth standard, which means that it's accessible by many end user devices, and that number of devices is growing in a almost weekly basis. There's more devices added to the Bluetooth website. And there are hearing aids and hearing devices that are able to connect directly today, and that number is expected to grow in the coming months. There's a large audiology event taking place next week, so we're eagerly watching to see what comes about. So some of the applications that come to mind when we're thinking about Auracast have actually broken down into what's good applications today versus potential future applications. And we've been dipping our toes in some of the future applications already. But the reason why I've separated these out is because some of those future applications are really reliant upon end user devices being able to connect directly. So some great applications for Auracast in our lives today would be inside auditoriums, performing arts spaces, teaching spaces within universities or education, meeting rooms, going up to size spaces such as stadiums. Our first stadium deployment was in New Zealand earlier this year, and they've had some great feedback from the end users there. Some of those future use cases are more of the transient environments that we encounter with assisted listening, such as train stations, where we've been doing some work at Bristol Temple Meads train station, doing some trials there, airports, onboard transportation and service points. But really those applications come into their own in the future. And the reason why I say in the future is because if we look at the devices that are available for end users today, the largest proportion of the receiving devices, of which there's 57 of listed on the Bluetooth website, the vast majority are normal consumer devices like headphones, earphones. There's a limited number of hearing aids or hearing devices that are compatible, which is limited to around 11 devices. We are expecting more to be announced in the next couple of weeks at OIHA and similar events taking place at this time of year. But we are heavily reliant upon connectivity in other means currently with the Auracast systems that are being deployed today. So making use of dedicated receivers with neck loops and still interfacing with the telecoil and the hearing aids so that we can get high quality audio to end users. So as it stands today, it is refreshing the interest in assistive listening in many countries around the world. And the reason why is because it's offering an increased audio quality in comparison to some of the legacy technologies like infrared or FM. It adds in additional security features such as encryption. you're able to take better control of the end user experience by utilizing some advanced features in receivers that are available. And it is often a simpler installation process than those other technologies. We're not worried about frequency so much, as we're able to have a lot of systems operating in a similar physical space. And in the future, some of the benefits will be no requirement for receivers, as people's hearing devices are directly compatible, an increased audio quality over that of what's capable with a neck loop and a telecoil. No requirement for third-party apps, and truly non-proprietary. So you could be using any number of different hearing aid or headphone manufacturers' products and still be able to connect to the system without any kind of restriction. So some of the deployments that we've been working with where we've seen success include universities. So we found many universities around the world have been adopting Auracast as a standard for their hearing augmentation. Judicial, so courts which historically have been in favor very much of infrared solutions have been deploying Auracast in a couple of different countries. Council chambers, this is one that we weren't expecting so much, but we've seen local government adopt it in the UK certainly, as well as in Australia. House of worship is a very important market for assistive listening, and it's certainly caught the attention of the house of worship market. Theatres have been very quick to get on board with Auracast, liking the fact that they're not limited by line of sight, and also they aren't using what they consider valuable frequencies when planning a system. As well as cinemas, stadia, museums, and transportation, where we have been running some long-term trials in different locations. So along the way, some of the challenges that we've encountered going into these different applications have included designing the deployments. For a small or medium-sized space, it can be quite simple. You just need to have a transmitter inside the room. But as we go to larger departments, deployments, we tend to find that more design is required, especially where there's installation limitations. And it's not dissimilar to our background as a manufacturer, being hearing loops. We are used to designing deployments, and it comes in again for Auracast. Keeping the end user experience as simple as possible is one of those things that is really quite important. We don't want to overwhelm people with options, so trying to control that end user experience has certainly been front of mind. And then balancing privacy versus accessibility. Encryption is an option that's available within Auracast. But as we encrypt to increase privacy, it becomes more difficult and more challenging for end users to connect. So we have to give them encryption keys, for example. So been working with other manufacturers to make that a seamless process. But quite often the answer is managing the systems in other ways. Although you can encrypt, sometimes limiting the physical radiation of the signal can be a better solution there. And then Auracast operates on 2.4 gigahertz in that range, which can be congested in some environments, and so that introduces its own set of challenges. So in a quiet environment, the range, as we said before, can be in excess of 100 meters. But if we're in a space with a lot of 2.4 gigahertz signals taking place, our range can diminish. So quite often we're finding that it's not an issue, but in those kind of busy environments, it can be important to conduct frequency scans and also trials of performance to see how it performs in those type of situations. So that brings me to the end of the brief section that I was planning to cover today. Andrew, do you want to take back the screen?
Yep. That'd be great. Thank you, Sam. I'm sure already there's going to be a number of questions that have come out of that presentation. Really good presentation, Sam. Thank you for that. Alastair, a good presentation to follow. That should fit nicely with your thoughts and stuff. So over to you.
It always helps if you come off mute. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see and hear me now and see my slides, and I'll be told if you can't. So yeah, I've been invited to give RNID's perspective on Auracast. I'm conscious that this is a very international audience, and so you may not know who we are. I've just been told that you can't see my slides yet, so let me try and do that again. Maybe that looks more promising. Okay, I've got a thumbs up. Lovely. Let me just rearrange my screen again. Okay, so yeah, so I'm giving, so just to give you a bit of background as to who RNID is, we are the national charity supporting the 18 million people in the UK who are deaf, have hearing loss or tinnitus. And our work is quite wide-ranging and ambitious, and we have three core kind of strands to our strategy. We are changing society and public attitudes. So deafness and hearing loss is something that affects also people, and we want to make sure that everybody is as well supported as they can be. We have an online hearing check where people can check their hearing. We are encouraging and want people to understand the importance of protecting their hearing, and we want to raise awareness and make sure that the public understands what deafness is, which means we can break down sort of societal barriers to inclusion. We are changing systems and services. So we've got four kind of main strands of the programs of work that we do, including biomedical research, equipping employers, harnessing the power of technology to make all aspects of life accessible and inclusive to our communities, and ensuring that access to hearing health is available through the NHS for everyone who needs it in a way that's convenient to them. And then finally, we are changing lives for individuals one by one. And this really means about all the various support services that we offer to people in our communities, whether that's in person in the community, through our website, or through our contact centre. The reason for going into all these different things that we're doing is just to really highlight the way that we are trying to take a kind of a whole system approach to improving the lives of the people that we support. So how I fit into that, I come from an engineering background. The PhD in spatial audio perception, spent some time in industry designing hardware before going back into academia to do research in acoustic signal processing. And more recently, I've been working on innovation projects, looking at behavior change and user research, and how we can really get the new technology that is available and that people are developing into the hands of users so that it can have the benefit and impact that we know it should. So within the context of RNID, that involves using my technical expertise to help colleagues understand what there is, including what technology is coming, and helping us, our frontline colleagues, to answer queries and support our communities. And one of the most important and interesting things that I do is working with companies on consultancy projects to help them embed the needs of users into their product design. So after that quite long introduction, I'm here to talk about why we are excited about Auracast, the concerns that we have, what we're doing to try and address those concerns, and where we're headed next. So the excitement part. We know that noise and reverberation make it harder to understand speech. This is true for everybody, but it particularly impacts people who have hearing loss. Even if speech is intelligible, it can cause fatigue, which just makes it harder to do the things that you want to do. We know that direct-to-ear audio makes it easier to understand speech, just relieving some of that burden and giving people clear access to audio, which is great. So connectivity traditionally has been done in 3 different ways. Bluetooth Classic, which is really common in all consumer electronics, but it has too much latency to offer a useful assistive listening solution. There is proprietary technologies which work well, but they can be expensive and they're not interoperable, which means they're just hard to access. And then we have the trusty telecoil, which has been around for decades, has a proven benefit, and is readily available in hearing aids and hearing devices. But it's not available in mainstream technology, and not all situations are suitable for being looped. So really, what I'm interested in today is how we can take the benefits of what we call Bluetooth Classic, the benefits of proprietary technology, and combine them. And if you do that, you get what we call Bluetooth LE, that is low energy audio, which in other words is Bluetooth audio done properly. It delivers low latency, low power. It's a non-proprietary standard. It allows for things like multi-device pairing, and it includes a hearing aid profile, so you can adjust the properties of your hearing aid directly within the Bluetooth settings. But it's not just for hearing devices, it's for all audio devices. It should soon be available in all devices. It's a standard part of, it could be a standard part of Bluetooth. And the real benefit of this is it means that hearing devices are using the same technology as devices that people are already familiar with. We could then add on top of that what we call the Bluetooth audio, broadcast audio profile, which is where the kind of magic happens, because we could have the ability to have one source to many receivers. And if we have specific configurations of that, then we can call it the Auracast. That's a trademark that is controlled by the Bluetooth SIG. The joy and the kind of real excitement of Auracast is that it's one system providing equal access to audio, whether or not they have a diagnosed hearing loss. That's the really important thing here. So in the UK, at least, there are 18 million adults who could benefit from hearing aids, but we know that only 3 million use them. If we can make assistive listening systems available in a technology that doesn't require you to have a diagnosed hearing loss to access, then it means that we can level that playing field and we can give people access to assistive listening earlier. We know that people take can be up to 7 to 10 years to seek support with their hearing when they start to think that they have a hearing loss. We want to bridge that gap and make sure that people can access the best quality audio as soon as possible. I'm going to show a quick slide which helps to explain Auracast. I'm not sure we've had that yet, and I think it can be helpful just to see the different bits of the system that I'm going to mention in my talk. So there are 3 essential bits. There's a transmitter, which is broadcasting audio itself, but also information, metadata about the audio. We have an assistant, and this is the key part of an Auracast system, which picks up this metadata. So it knows that there's a broadcast available. It is paired with a receiver. So the assistant can tell the receiver what to listen to. This is really important because receivers are typically small if they're hearing aids or earbuds, and they don't have a user interface. And so the design of the assistant is the key bit to how we make Auracast available to everyone. There are lots of places where Auracast could be used. I'm going to rapidly skip through a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to have time to talk about them, but I think just by skipping through them, hopefully you start to get a flavour of the potential of Auracast. Okay, so we can come back and ask questions at the end if there's any of those particular use cases that caught your eye. But I think it's important to carry on with some of our concerns. So a lot of the design, or at least the initial implementations of Auracast, have very much depended on smartphones. We don't think that's a great idea because there's lots of people or situations where a smartphone is not available or not desirable. But there are many other form factors that an Auracast assistant can take. It could be a watch, a charging case, a key fob, remote control. We could use voice control or even AI, or we could have DIY or maker-based solutions. The key thing is that we want to involve users in the design to make sure they're meeting the needs of the individuals. We think that Auracast needs to be easy to use, so it should just work. So options not buried in menus, consistency of terminology across manufacturers, and the ability to remember or reconnect to broadcasts. Again, we want to make sure involving users in design is important. And finally, the final user experience that people get is not just the technology itself. It requires good information, it requires deaf-aware staff, and it requires regular testing and maintenance. Again, we should be involving users in design. So I'm going to quickly mention some projects that we've been working on, getting our hands dirty, trying to ensure that Auracast is systems are implemented the way that we think and our users would like them to be. So about 2 years ago now, we convened a roundtable event bringing together people with lived experience, manufacturers, and members of the government in the UK to run some demos and a discussion on what needs to be done to make Auracast available in the wider infrastructure of the UK national infrastructure. We have hosted a workshop with Samsung, bringing together their user experience team and members of our research panel to have a deep dive into the different capabilities of Auracast and look at people's aspirations for how that should work within the context of a smartphone and the various products they offer. Samsung were good enough to invite us to a demo of Auracast in St. Paul's Cathedral, where people got the chance to go on a guided tour and also listen to a choral evensong service, both of which highlighted aspects of the experience which were brilliant and also some that could be improved. We have been involved with Ampetronic, with a trial at Bristol Temple Meads train station, where we were able to involve, again, members of our research panel and live speech intelligibility tests, which showed a vast improvement in intelligibility when listening through Auracast over just the public address system. And we managed to have a focus group where we asked people about their experience. Some of the best quotes from that were this one I quite like. Someone said, "I was really surprised in a good way by the way those numbers are coming through, by the clarity, and even just hearing the general station announcements. It was so much better. I have struggled in the past with them." Or this one, which was much more snappy. "The sound was fantastic. One hell of a difference." So as Andrew mentioned at the start, we have published a report on what we think is hopefully everything you need to know about Auracast. It looks at some interesting use cases and some of the challenges that need to be overcome and makes recommendations for different stakeholders. So what is coming next? I've got a few predictions. The first is that there will possibly paradoxically be an increase in the number of people having telecoils activated. And Juliette will explain exactly why that is going to happen. There'll be a new product category of Auracast-enabled microphones. We think Auracast will become standard across all hearing devices, in addition to telecoils in the near future. And we think there will be a whole range of novel Auracast assistants to meet all users' needs. So we had a quick look at why we are excited, the concerns we have, some of the things that we've been doing to address those, and where we're headed. Thank you very much. And if you want to get in touch, these are my contact details.
Thank you, Alastair. That was a really informative presentation. Already the Q&A box is filling up with questions which hopefully we can get to and get some answers out to the participants. So thanks again for that, Alastair. So now we head over to Juliette. Juliette, as we said earlier, has a great experience from her audiologist and her advocacy background, and I'm sure you'll enjoy her presentation.
Okie doke. So the first loaded question, can everybody hear me? And can everybody see me? I take it those are thumbs up signs. All right, good. So here's my background. And I moved to the United States back in 1981. And the only thing I'm going to say about that is, what was I thinking? All right. My work continues, and it really, I'm passionate about what I do. That's the main reason. But I also get some grant funding from the David and Carol Myers Foundation, which permits me to travel. I have my slides available via this QR code, and I will repeat that at the end of the presentation so that you can get an access to them. And yes, I am going to talk about the fact that my TEDx talk just went over 1 million views. So really, and I really liked what Alastair was talking about, because he is involving the public and he is involving real world consumers. So these consumers, and I'm hoping that you have gotten that from the previous presentations, is these are hearing aid and cochlear implant users with telecoils. These are hearing aid and cochlear implant users without telecoils that are built in, but they have access to a telecoil via an accessory. Not ideal, but it's doable. Over-the-counter devices, and rarely, I'm only aware of 1 or 2 model over-the-counter devices that include telecoils, or consumers that don't have devices, don't have hearing aids yet, don't think that their hearing loss is bad enough. But it also includes people with disabilities such as auditory processing disorders, low vision, blindness, and autism. And the takeaway from my presentation is that, yes, currently the telecoil gives you access to all legacy assistive listening systems and to future systems. And that's what we're going to be talking about. I've belabored this to death, this issue. Most hearing aid and cochlear implant users need additional assistance to hear their best, especially if they go through the world wearing a cochlear implant or wear what are called occluding ear molds. And I am firmly of the belief that professionals don't really understand the difficulties that their patients are experiencing in public venues. And why is that? Well, hearing aids don't give you normal hearing. They correct your hearing loss from maybe about half of the degree of hearing loss. Better if you wear a cochlear implant. Microphones have limited ranges, and they make all sounds louder, irregardless of what you hear, and of the marketing by the manufacturers. So to overcome those limitations, they can be overcome, and I'm going to separate them for personal situations and for public situations. And for personal situations, yes, I'm a firm believer that Auracast audio the sharing part of the Auracast audio will benefit consumers. And that could be in the form of clip-on microphones or tabletop microphones or multifunctional microphones. Could be TV streamers. And my big hope, my fervent hope, is that those accessories will become non-proprietary. May the best accessory win, right? Currently, if you wear Widex hearing aids, you cannot use a Starkey tabletop microphone and vice versa. So that's a big deal. And Auracast is going to make that a lot easier so that you can connect to personal devices. Hopefully it'll be cheaper. That could be TVs, that could be laptops, it could be computers. But think of washing machines. It could beep in your hearing aid or in your earbud that the washing machine is done or that there's somebody at your door. But we've already run in the first issue with televisions that tout that they are Bluetooth LE audio compatible. Yes, the new Samsung television has that feature and has Auracast built in, but it eliminated the audio out or the optical out, so that somebody who's already using a proprietary device and now buys a new TV doesn't have a way to plug in their proprietary device because that device isn't Auracast ready. Now, the first Samsung telephones that are Auracast compatible are coming out, but Apple has been notoriously tight-lipped about this, but it's expected that with a firmware update, those devices or the later devices will become compatible. And of course, what I'm hearing is that if your TV isn't Auracast compatible, but you have Auracast compatible hearing aids, then you could just buy a dongle. But these dongles have issues because they may broadcast at a higher sampling rate than your hearing aids are capable of receiving. So buyer beware when you are buying some of these accessories. And that's because Auracast can be used 3 different ways, and those ways may or may not support hearing aids. And the first one is the personal audio sharing. I apologize for this. The first one may be personal audio sharing, and it could be from a smartphone or from a laptop computer. There's going to be commercial sharing of sound, and that would be happening in places where there is no sound. Think of airports and fitness clubs and sports bars and maybe pre-recorded audio tours in musea. And then the third is the streaming of the assistive listening system for live sound. And that's the technology that's going to be used in theaters, lectures, and meetings. And in this discussion, I'm using the term Auracast very loosely, but generally I'm referring to Auracast Assistive Listening or Auracast ALS. But the full name is a much more mouthful term, Auracast broadcast audio, used as part of an assistive listening system. So that's for overcoming personal situations. But for overcoming public situations, what's a hearing aid user and what's a cochlear implant user to do? Alastair already belabored some of these types of places. They vary from huge stadiums to yoga studios or guided tours. I mean, it appears that the application of Auracast is endless. Now, We are currently talking about 4 different types of assistive listening systems that are in use, and I'm grouping FM and IR infrared system in one because they both require the user to pick up an assistive listening device. And there's hearing loops, and then there are direct wired systems. Direct wired systems are rarely used, but they are still mentioned in the ADA law in the United States. And in the US, these 3 systems are what are known as ADA compliant. The 4th system, audio over Wi-Fi, thank goodness, it is only used rarely. It does not provide a good benefit for people who are hard of hearing, can work in places where audio is silent. And as far as we know, there is no known audio over Wi-Fi product that meets the ADA. And then we're talking about the 6th system, or on my slide number 5, Auracast streamed assistive listening systems. And currently it's simply too soon to say if these individual Auracast products or installations will meet the US ADA law. And the law in the US stipulates that where a PA system is installed, an assistive listening system, or where a PA system is in use, an assistive listening system shall be provided. And there are similar laws in other countries, and I have all kinds of resources on my slides if you're interested, that were gathered, I think, by Williams and by Ampetronic. Very helpful. Thank you very much. In the US, consumers may also request that an accommodation is made even in places where no PA systems are provided. And when I'm talking about hearing loops, people may immediately have some type of hearing loop system in mind. I'm not only talking about hearing loops in rooms or in churches. These could be hearing loops on counters, in taxi cabs, and doorbell systems, or they can be in a library where obviously there is no microphone. In this situation, there's an arrow that points at this particular application. And the interesting part is that this hearing loop works for the librarian who's hard of hearing, but will also work for the consumer standing at the other side of the counter. Advantage of hearing loops continue to be that hearing loop broadcasts audio direct into the hearing aid and in effect makes the distant speaker on the wall or in the ceiling, brings it direct into the user ear, very much with what we do when we bring a phone close to our ear. It works. It improves the signal to noise ratio. So if you have a hearing device with a T-coil, you can simply activate the telecoil program with the push of a button or the swipe on a smartphone app. But it can also be used by users who don't have telecoils in their hearing aids, or for those who don't have hearing instruments, and they simply have to pick up a hearing loop receiver. And when I say the word simply, it's not that simple. Trying to find a receiver, hoping that they are charged and working, and hoping that the person you're asking knows where they're being kept can be a huge issue. FM and infrared systems are also capable of being used by anybody, but for both users with telecoils, they can pick up a receiver with a neck loop and activate the telecoil in their hearing device. Or option B, if you don't have telecoils or if you don't have hearing aids, you pick up a listening device with an ear shell or earphones or earbuds, or you bring your own. Auracast. How Auracast is expected to be used is absolutely beautiful. It's seamless. You walk in, You sit down, you put your earbuds in your ears, you swipe on your smartphone, and bingo, the sound starts streaming in your ears. The same would go for Auracast compatible hearing aids or bone anchored hearing devices or cochlear implants. But, and those of you who've heard me speak have heard me say, but there's always a but, right? There's a need for an intermediary device. This is not as simple as pushing a button on a hearing device, which will immediately exclude a number of people who are technically challenged. But I agree with Alastair that simple intermediary devices can and are expected to be developed. And because Auracast is projected to be so easy and so wonderful, we have seen a number of announcements by people in the industry, in the hearing aid industry, in the Bluetooth special interest group, people announcing with much fanfare that the Sydney Opera House, for example, just had Auracast installed. What that announcement doesn't show you is this: the fact that before any attendee at that event had to either go pick up wired earphones with an AURI receiver, it's an Ampetronic product in this case, or they had to go to another table and pick up a smartphone with specifically paired earphones that were checked and double checked to make sure that they were working. And as such, for them, it appeared to be a very seamless demonstration. And I've been at those demonstrations, and they are amazing. They work extremely well. But how Auracast assistive listening system will likely be used in the foreseeable future by the real people, the people who have hearing loss, is because few own Auracast compatible hearing aids and cochlear implants, most users will have to borrow a receiver with headphones or a neck loop from the venue. That means that no, they can't use their app on their phone or a button on their hearing aid. They have to go to a service desk and pick up a receiver and have to know that they have to get a neck loop receiver so that they can hear with their telecoil. So for those hearing aid users, Auracast will initially be a major step backwards in the convenience of using a system. Of course, for people who don't have any of these devices, they can go and pick up a set of earphones. So for owners of hearing devices with telecoils, they must go and pick up a listener and a listener with a neck loop. And these neck loops are not just plug and play neck loops. These neck loops have to provide a strong and even magnetic signal. And I've tried the neck loop from this particular brand, Auracast system, and it worked remarkably well. I could wear my hearing aid, turn on a telecoil, and with the receiver around my neck was able to walk well into the parking lot to hear the broadcast in a church in Illinois. But for owners who have hearing aids without telecoils, they still have to pick up a listener, use earphones, and of course there's issues with earphones. Earphones can feedback. By the way, my father was so hard of hearing, he couldn't hear the feedback. So he'd be sitting somewhere with earphones, they would whistle, people around them could hear, but he couldn't hear it themselves. And of course, the audio quality then is significantly less. Now, for owners with Auracast compatible hearing aids, life is good, right? They can activate the Auracast stream with the app in the hearing aid if they have an Auracast enabled hearing aid. And we're only aware that a couple of models in the Starkey line and in the Resound line are currently Auracast enabled. And of course, wireless earbuds and earphones should work as well. And for those of you who have followed some of the things that I have written and said and that have been posted on websites, is that there is no Auracast streamed assistive listening standard. That is not expected until late 2027. And there's a whole slew of issues that are not resolved. I think the most important one is that Auracast is just the transmission of the sound. Auracast is not an assistive listening system in itself. It is a part of one. There may be incompatibility issues, interoperability issues. I've learned that if a hearing aid has had a firmware update to make it compatible, it may not necessarily be compatible with some of the transmitters that have already shipped. And then the question becomes, who's going to update those transmitters? Who's going to troubleshoot this? Apparently there are issues with security and privacy, potential for interference, latency. Latency isn't just the transmission of Auracast latency, but it's the whole assistive listening system, the microphones, the sound processing from the PA system, and the transmission via Auracast into the hearing aid. That too adds latency. And why is that important? Because users, particularly users who are very hard of hearing, are going to want to use their hearing aids and hearing devices in what is called a microphone plus Auracast setting. Because if you're in church and you're listening or you're participating in a service and you are only listening to Auracast, you can no longer hear your own voice. So in order to be able to sing and to respond and to be feel part of that community, you're going to need a mic plus Auracast setting. If there is a significant delay, that will manifest itself in an echo or a decrease in the sound quality. And of course, these systems have to work in all use cases. It could be pharmacies, schools, courtrooms, arenas. And in these arenas, there have to be multiple transmitters. And it's my understanding that the handing off of signals from one transmitter to the other has not been worked out, or the technology hasn't been worked out. As an audiologist, I'm a huge proponent of automatic gain control. In the transmitters, there has to be a way to control large variations of sound, or people with hearing loss are going to constantly have to vary the volume in their devices. And the standard, of course, is going to make sure that these systems are going to set up so they work for people who are hard of hearing. And the most important thing of all, we need independent, non-manufacturer developed proof for people with hearing loss. And having been involved with tens of new hearing aid rollouts by the hearing aid manufacturers, all I'm going to ask you is what could possibly go wrong? With so many different parts in this system, this whole interoperability, this whole ecosystem issue needs to be worked out. So is Auracast assistive listening really here? Well, in my opinion, the answer is no. It's too early days. There are few transmitters out there. Installations are extremely rare. The replacement cycle of hearing devices and cell phones and assistive listening systems means it's going to take years before consumers can access these systems. Direct to hearing aid connections have to be developed somehow. If you belong to a house of worship and you're only going to be listening to one audio stream, there has to be a solution so that all you have to do is push on the button of that hearing aid and that instrument will receive the audio stream direct. No smartphone use. It's got to be easy. And as far as I know, that technology has also not been developed. And then the whole assistive listening. This is not just plug and play. The sound that gets broadcast to hearing aids should be in reality very different than the sound that gets broadcast to people with normal hearing. And just an example, yesterday I got a phone call from a gentleman in his 70s who has used a hearing loop at a convention center, uses a hearing loop at his church, and he said, yeah, my audiologist said there's something new coming and that I should call you because the hotel has been unwilling to install a hearing loop because they were just too expensive. And I was caught flat-footed. This is a difficult discussion to have with an uninformed consumer. He didn't know if his hearing aids were Auracast ready. He didn't know if the other users in his Rotary Club had hearing aids and whether they had telecoils. And in the end, in this whole discussion where I'm trying to explain a hearing loop is still the simplest solution, but it could be done with an FM system, but then who's going to manage the FM system? It could be done with Auracast system, but guaranteed there are even fewer users who can use it. So then everybody is going to need a receiver. I had him utterly confused, and we ended this conversation with an invitation for me to please come to the Rotary Club and give a lecture. And I am steeped in this stuff. And now we want audiologists in the community all over the country to start having this discussion. It is a tough topic on a good day to explain to consumers with hearing aids and telecoils. And I think initially it's going to be even more confusing with Auracast thrown into this mix. So we are very, very early days, and I want this to work. I've experienced it. It was seamless and easy, but it's going to take time. It took Wisconsin years to build up, and I have fostered 1,000 hearing loops or more than 1,000 loops in Wisconsin alone, but that took more than a decade. So I'm a firm believer that we need united consumer organizations from around the world. We need to have the professionals and the consumer organizations to apply pressure to the manufacturers that they need more choice in ADA access ready hearing aids. Those are hearing aids that are either Auracast enabled or Auracast ready, but still include a telecoil. And that means that audiologists need to start talking about all technologies and not just about Auracast or not just about telecoils. These consumers need to be informed. That means that there needs to be information in the mandated user instruction guides by the manufacturers and not just only about Auracast. And that also means in Europe that there needs to be an update to how practitioners practice hearing care services to not only include a reference to telecoils, but also to Auracast. And so this all needs to be done and developed. So I'm really hoping that there are some representatives from the hearing industry at this event. And then there are some other concerns. I'm not done yet with concerns that Auracast can't fix, and that could be a whole other lecture. There's all kinds of people problems, no systems installed, no neck loops provided. poor use of microphones in venues. It's one thing if you're trying to listen to one person, it's something else if you're doing this for a broadcast, a Broadway show. Systems aren't turned on, systems aren't turned off when there is maintenance and that not turned back on. Wrong audio mix sent to the assistive listening systems. I'm still dealing with audiologists who tell consumers that telecoils are old technologies. The hearing industry manufacturers simply not providing enough options for consumers with standard batteries and telecoils, rechargeable batteries and telecoils and Auracast. So we are early days in development of all these different products. I'm dealing with venues that install a system but then don't announce it, don't have signage. And Auracast isn't going to fix this. And I know how much work and effort this takes, and I do this basically on a full-time basis. And consumers are not complaining. Well, because they don't know of assistive listening systems. They don't know they could be hearing so much more clearly. Consumers are uninformed. They also don't know how to give feedback and to complain. That could be another whole other lecture. And here's my prediction. And by the way, for 16 years, some consumer organizations have been pleading, begging, demanding, asking for hearing aids with telecoils. And now they've changed their tune, and now it's going to be for hearing aids with telecoils and Auracast. My prediction is Auracast will first take off in those communities or places where there are already a lot of hearing loops, where they are being used, where people are familiar going to places and activating their telecoil, and where Auracast is then installed as a second technology, as a coexistent technology. Places where there is no assistive listening system, but where these current loop users want to hear better. That could be large venues, that could be concerts, but I need consumers to complain, to bitch, to demand hearing access. This cannot come from the top. This must come from the bottom up. And I need support from the Auracast evangelists. I've been called the hearing loop evangelist, so back at you. Because they need to be out there promoting the replacement of poor FM and infrared systems with Auracast systems that will serve users of hearing aids and are ready for users who have Auracast. These Auracast evangelists have to promote the coexistence of systems, the interoperability, the studies that need to be done. They need to promote quality installations. This is not a simple plug and play. Look what I plugged in my church. That's not an assistive listening system. We need to reach these underserved consumers, these people with hearing loss who don't know about this. And we need, again, I'll belabor that again, telecoil and Auracast in all hearing instruments so that they can use all different systems. There's my resources. There's another reference for my slides if you are interested. And I am going to stop sharing. Ta-da! Did I stay within my allotted time? No, of course not. All right. Are you surprised, Andrew?
That was an incredible presentation, Juliette. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Lots of thought-provoking questions, which I think sometimes get brushed under the carpet, but it's good that they're in an event like this, they're out in the open, and that's what we're hoping to use these events for. That it's not just
it's not plug and play.
There's more to it, And we need to be grown up enough to have those conversations, because it can be a real success, this technology. And
Yes, yes.
how we make it work. That's the thing. So thank you for that. It was very good. And you did go over a little bit over your allocated time, but it was worth it. Right, everyone. So the Q&A session, we've got, I think, about 10 minutes. If the guys can just put the cameras on, thank you, Alastair and Sam, and maybe Peter. Right, Lisa's put up here. Can we start with Mark Birch's question? Let's see if we can find Mark. We've got lots of questions come through. If anyone can see Mark's question before I can, please feel free to.
I'm struggling to find a question, Andrew. I think it might be that Mark raised his hand at the start of the session.
My mistake.
Mark, can you unmute yourself? Is that possible?
And he's probably on mute. So, Lisa, can you unmute Mark, please?
Might it be faster to just read some of the questions?
Yes, I think that might be. We might not be able to get our answers, but let's go through some of them. One for you, Sam. Are we best to continue with induction loops currently? I keep getting asked about the new tech, but unless my understanding is incorrect, an interface is required for Auracast to work. If a user has Bluetooth-enabled hearing devices, is there an app for iPhone or similar that would enable Auracast broadcast to be relayed to Bluetooth hearing aids?
Okay, so it's a really complicated subject, as I'm sure you'll have gathered from the presentations, and it's really nuanced depending upon the application you're going into. So if we're starting with a new build and we've got access everywhere, then for compatibility with the most devices, hearing loop makes the most sense. If we're going into a space where we've got installation constraints, we may consider other options, and then we're faced with an option, a variety of technologies. It could be hearing loop, it could be infrared, it could be an FM system, could be audio over Wi-Fi, any of those solutions. Then we have to look at the pros and cons of each technology, and it depends upon the priorities of the venue and the end users that use it. So in many cases, we find that if there's an existing building, they have a community that uses it, then them asking their community which technology makes sense for them can often lead to the best results for what will actually get used. But it's not a simple answer. If we're looking at receiver-based systems, then it can make a lot of sense to go with an Auracast solution with receivers, because you're going to have that future compatibility. But if loop is practical, that's going to service the most people in most scenarios.
Thank you, Sam. I think it's worth mentioning a point that Juliette was talking about at the end of her presentation about the coexistence of technology. And it's important that where there are venues that use hearing loops, for example, to have an Auracast transmitter as part of their offering for assistive listening can only be beneficial to the people that use and want to access that particular venue. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we could probably have another couple of these webinars and still have not enough time. Another question.
I think we could probably go all day, Andrew. There's so many variables to this, aren't there? But to answer the question about iPhone apps, in the case of Auracast devices, typically they have their own app. So if that's a pair of GN hearing aids, if it's a pair of Sennheiser earbuds, JBL earbuds, Starkey hearing aids, the end user would use their device's app to then instruct the device what to connect to. And that could be on an Android, it could be on an iOS device.
Thank you, Sam. There's a couple more just anonymous attendee. Why did Juliette not mention dongles like Flugu and Aventry C882 Aura as a quick win?
So there are dongles available, and there's lots of different devices that apply to different environments. So so a dongle may be appropriate, say if you're using it with your laptop, maybe your TV. Your dongle might not cover a larger space. So there's different products for different applications.
Different applications, yeah. Anthony Stacey, are you sure the acoustics of public spaces are not the biggest problem? Maybe that's Peter one you could.
Well, yes, and that's why we want to get the sound directly to the hearing aid or to the listener's ears. And that's the whole point. So therefore you have an announcement. It's straight from the microphone, straight into that. So you're bypassing the acoustics of the space. And that's the whole point of assistive listening. And that is, you know, the fundamental of assistive listening systems is in fact to overcome the poor acoustic environment, be it noise or acoustics. And Auracast, as Juliette said, Auracast is not an assistive listening system in its own right, although it was originally pushed that way. It is purely a transport system or a transmission system for the audio. There is nothing in the Auracast standard, and there will be nothing in the Auracast standard about the assistive listening part, i.e. what happens in front of the transmitter. The Auracast standard will only talk about the transmitter and the receiver and the audio stream that goes between those two. There will be nothing whatsoever about the assistive listening part of that, apart to mention another standard. But the Auracast standard itself will not be mentioning assistive listening.
Thank you for that, Peter. Harry Heifer, there's a question here. My understanding is that final criteria won't come out until December 2027. Will these early adopters find out they jumped the gun and have to retool? Important to make it clear that Auracast won't miraculously replace all other assistive listening systems overnight, as it will take time for end users to evolve their technology, i.e. hearing aids, smartphones, etc. Other questions about around standards, etc., etc. Then we have some other points here. How many hard of hearing people who use hearing aids have assistance? ? That's from an anonymous attendee. That would probably be some useful information if someone could go out and collect that. That would be another task in itself.
Can I come in on that, on the question about early adoption? Because I think it's important that we don't scare everybody off. I think it's really important we don't, if there are devices on the market which benefit you now and they do what you need them to do, then I don't think we should have kind of buyer's remorse. I don't think we should say, okay, well, it might not work for something that is promised in the future. I think we should say, if this setup gets you what you need and does better than what you had before, then that's of value to you. And so rather than, I think that if you can test a new pair of hearing aids with a new TV streamer that's all Auracast enabled and it works for you now, then great. But don't buy it thinking this is a once and forever solution. Buy it thinking that this gets me better than what I can do right now. And it's quite possible it can do better than what you can do right now, because you can also use all that Bluetooth LE audio stuff I was talking about to connect it to various different phones, various different computers, all that stuff. I think the interoperability aspect of just the Bluetooth low energy audio already makes it way better than what we could do before. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, that's a very valid point there. I think what is coming across is the messaging. I think that collectively we have a role in the industry to make clearer. So this isn't.
And I'd love to chime in here. Am I on? Yes.
You are.
I mean, I promote to consumers that they get hearing aids that do it all, right? They need Auracast in their hearing aid. And if they live in a community or they go to theaters or they belong to a house of worship where every Sunday they've been using the loop on a regular basis and they are now in a market for new hearing aids, they need hearing aids that have both. And that means that we really need the manufacturers to step up and say, ta-da, we understand. You can't talk about Auracast without talking also about assistive listening. And when you talk about assistive listening, you're talking about the legacy systems as well as what's coming down the pike. So you need both.
Sam, I don't know what your when your trip to Germany next week, how many new devices will have Telecoil and Auracast equipped technology in the hearing aids, but it would be interesting to see if any of them pick that up.
Well, there's been plenty of messaging from different organizations that there is a preference to have both technologies supported, both in devices and for deployments. So by deployments, I mean public spaces with both technologies present. And from our side of the fence with the deployments in public environments, we're seeing plenty of overlap of different technologies going in the same space, be that spaces that currently have induction loop, like Juliette made reference to the Opera House. Every space there has induction loop and they've added Auracast as a solution there. And we're getting quite a few spaces doing the same. Our messaging to them is often leave it what's in there well alone.
What works?
Add it as an addition.
Not an either or.
Don't take anything out. And we're seeing that come through quite well. And then there are other spaces where we do have to go down the receiver base. And we're often met with the response of, but I don't need receivers, it's direct to hearing aids. And it's not yet. There's not that user base available there. So as in Juliette's presentation, there was the receivers with the neck loops. That really is an important part of an Auracast deployment today, that a receiver system is provided. If we're looking at the US and Australia, that's mandated by their legislation that receivers should be provided. I recognize that Juliette said that there isn't a reference to an Auracast system in the ADA standard. And so when we're specifying the systems, we're looking at them as receiver-based solutions as a equivalent to an FM or an IR. So there's no reduction in receiver quantities there. It's still the same number of neck loops required for a system.
Guys, we've run out of time, I'm afraid. As I say, it might be well worth having another session, webinar too, from the team that we've put together today. And I'd just like to thank everyone for participating, and obviously thanking everyone for those that have been speaking. It's been really a good session and thought-provoking, and it's lots and lots of things to consider. I think from our perspective, as we've hosted it, is, Lisa, if we can, we'll capture some of the majority of questions that require answering, and maybe we'll get those round to the panelists to get their feedback on that, and we'll get that posted somewhere so that people can know that they've had their questions answered. We've had a good hour and a quarter, hour and 18 minutes. So thanks again, everyone, for your time. I know everyone's very busy and stuff, but really appreciate that and look forward to our next one. Hopefully we'll have that in a couple of months' time, and watch out for stuff coming out on social media. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.